This romantasy starts with a girl no one wanted and a darkness that knew her before she knew herself. The Wilmore house had always been hers. That was the cruelty of it, the particular elegant cruelty that only families who love property more than people are capable of. Her parents had not expected to die within the same winter. They had not, in their careful arrangements and their careful silences, made adequate provisions for the possibility that their only child, disowned, erased, her name spoken in that house as a warning, would become by default of law and blood the sole heir to everything they had spent their lives curating. The solicitor had come to her lodgings in the city with his hat in his hands and a document he could not quite meet her eyes over. Lady Beth had read it once, folded it precisely, and began packing. She arrived at Wilmore House the way one returns to the scene of something, not triumphant, not wounded, simply present. The iron gate opened at her touch, as though it remembered her childhood fingers on its bars. The torches flanking the entrance caught flame without tinder or spark, and the ivy began to move. She stood in the doorway and looked into the dark interior of the house she had grown up and been expelled from, and she said quietly, "I know you are here, Ilyas." The silence that answered her was not empty. It had shape and weight, and something almost like relief. "I have known since I was 8, she added. She had been a quiet child in a house that preferred its children, quieter still, present at meals, invisible otherwise, grateful and undemanding, and correctly shaped in all the ways that mattered to people who cared very much about the shape of things. She had not been correctly shaped, though. She had known this before she had words for it, the way children know the essential truths about themselves in the body before the mind catches. She had also known with the same wordless certainty that something moved through the Wilmore house after dark. It watched her the way a storm watches from the distance, aware, gathering, not yet decided. She had left crumbs of shortbread on the windowsill of the rotunda when she was 8. She did not know why. It seemed correct, and they were gone by morning. She had never told her parents. She had learned very early the categories of things one did not tell her parents, and a demon in the rotunda sat comfortably alongside the truth who she was. Both secrets kept in the same quiet interior room, safe from hands that would have not handled with care. And her parents finally said aloud what they had long made clear through silence, and the carriage had taken her down the fog-grey road away from Wilmore's iron gate. She turned and looked back. In the uppermost window of the rotunda, something dark pressed against the glass. She had lifted her hand. Briefly, the shape at window was still there. She had told herself that she would come back. She had not known it. It would take death, 2 deaths, to make it possible. Ilyas had occupied Wilmore House for longer than the house itself had stood in its current form. He had watched it built around him, stone by stone, as though the architecture had simply grown up to accommodate something that was already there. He had watched the family move in. He had watched them live their careful, cold, immaculate lives. And the daughter who left shortbread on the windowsill and looked directly at his shadow without flinching. He had, in the centuries prior, done things one does when one is boredom-made sentiment and given no particular direction. He had breathed cold on the town's edges. He had made the crossroads feel wrong after dark. He had not thought of himself as a threat precisely, merely as a weather, the sort that reminded people the world was larger and stranger than their daily arrangements suggested. The daughter coming home changed the atmosphere entirely. She required nothing dramatic of him. She simply continued to know he was there and to behave accordingly, leaving that second cup, finishing the poems aloud he had silently continued for years, turning her head toward the front corner of her room when she spoke, as though she understood exactly where he was. "You could simply appear," one day she said while reading. A long pause. Then from the shadow near the bookcase, "I was not certain of my welcome." She turned a page. "You have been here longer than I have." That is not the same thing. She looked up then, directly at the place where the shadow had voice, and her expression was the one she wore when something settled into sense. "No," she agreed. "It's suppose it isn't," she gestured to the chair across from her. "Sit down, Ilyas." He sat, and something in the house exhaled deeply, as though it had been holding his breath for a very long time. The rotunda at midnight was where they were most themselves. She descended in dark lace and unhurried grace. He was almost always already there, more present each time, more solid. The purple-black of his brocade waistcoat catching the thin light that fell through the skylight's ironwork like something liturgical. He offered his hand with a formality they both understood was also tenderness, and she took it with the ease of someone accepting what had always been meant for him. They danced without music. The house made its own, timber and wind and the low percussion of fog rain on old stone. They laughed, richly, freely, the particular laughter of two people who had each been alone in their particular way for far too long and found in each other an architecture of understanding neither had expected. He told her of centuries. She told him of the town, its small dignities and small cruelties, the miller's wife, the lost children, the sick animals she had seen too quietly without announcement. "They fear you," he said once. "They fear what they haven't named." And she turned beneath his arm unhurried. He pulled her slightly closer, and neither of them remarked upon it. The town of Caldermist came to Lady Beth the way people came to things they need but cannot admit to needing, sideways after dark. The miller's boy at the gate, the schoolteacher's letter slipped under the door, old Faris appearing at the end of the drive with his hat twisted in his hands and a goat that hadn't eaten in a week. She went to them every time, wrapped her soul, walked the fog road, did what was needed, asked nothing in return. What she did not tell them what she would never tell them was that her presence in Wilmore House was the weight on the other end of a scale. That Ilyas, ancient and restless and capable of things the town could not afford to encounter, was held in the mansion's orbit by the gravity of her company. That every night she danced in the rotunda was a night he did not drift towards the crossroads. That every dawn she remained as a dawn Caldermist woke to safety. She had chosen this not as sacrifice. She would have been clear on that distinction, had anyone thought to ask. She had chosen it because the house was hers and he was hers in the way that rare and unlikely things become yours. Through recognition, through patience, through years of shortbread on windowsills and poems finished in the dark. The roses in the garden stayed dead. They had died the winter her parents had. She had tried once to coax them back. They resisted, and she had let them be. Something she thought bloom only when they are ready. Old maid Marn came on a Tuesday, in a thin hours before proper morning, with bread and the firm intention of scolding Lady Beth for missing 3 consecutive festivals. She found the front door unlatched. She found the rotunda still and silver in the early light, the skylight pouring its pale column onto the giant inlaid circle of marble below. She found Lady Beth at the center of it, her dark gown pulled around her like a closing curtain, her expression so profoundly at peace that Marn stood motionless for a long moment, simply looking. No wound, no fear, no evidence of anything but completion. Only a single black feather in her palm. Ilyas was gone. Wilmore House breathed differently now. Emptier, yes, but not bereft. The way a room feels after a long and good conversation, when the guests have departed and what remains is only warmth. Marn turned toward the garden gate to call for help and stopped. The roses are blooming. Every dead stem, every grey and skeletal cane that had held nothing but cold air since the parents' winter, alive, dark-rayed, extravagant, unhurried, smelling of something that had no single name but suggested old books and candlelight and laughter in a rotunda after midnight. The town understood then, the way towns understand things, all at once, and too late, and with a grief that is also gratitude. She had kept them alive and safe all those years, every midnight, every dance, every cup of tea left on a mantel. She had kept the darkness inside and the town safe. And she had never only asked them to know it. She had gone to them with bread and kindness, while returning each night to something ancient and enormous that she had simply quietly made into a home. They buried Lady Beth among the roses. There was no argument, a simple ceremony. It simply happened the way necessary things sometimes do. People arriving separately and standing together without instruction, understanding without being told that this place was and what it deserved. The house they left standing. The gate did not lock. Wilmore House stands empty, draped in ivy and fog. The rotunda opened to the sky through the great iron-laced eye. But some nights, when the mist sits low, and the road between the town and the hill feels briefly like the edge of something, those nearby will pause and listen and hear it, faint, rising through old stone and iron, unmistakable laughter to voices, easy and unhurried, as though they had all the time that was, and sometimes the smell of roses.
The ancient iron gate swung wide for her alone, to claim the silent halls of dark and weathered stone. She called his name aloud into the heavy shade, and knew the quiet pact that childhood crumbs had made. Within the gray rotunda, draped in midnight lace, she met his shadow form and stepped into embrace. They danced without a sound beneath